Hello, YouTube. I decided today in my boredom to go ahead and make a tier list of the series I've read. This is by no means an original idea. I think the video I saw that gave me this idea was by a Clockwork Reader, which I'll leave a link to that video in the description. She had many more series than I do. My list is a bit pitiful, but I probably would have a bigger list had I not taken about a 3-year reading hiatus, but it is what it is. So at the top we have Perfection, which is pretty self-explanatory. This book has no flaws. Like, I will not shut up about it. It is perfect. Then we have Chef's Kiss, which is, it was good. I really liked it, but like, it wasn't perfection. It just wasn't quite there, but it was. And then I was on a food kick when I made this, so our mid tier is potato chips, which is, it was good, it was great, but like, I mean, did I really need it? Like, it was okay. It didn't satiate me fully, but it was tasty. And then our next tier we have DoorDash, which is for anyone who's used DoorDash as frequently as I do would know, no matter how many issues you have with it, and no matter how much you hate it, deep, deep down inside you, you will always still use it because you love the convenience of it, which is our second to last tier. And then finally, we have spoiled milk. No one likes spoiled milk. It smells. It doesn't taste good. There are no positives to spoiled milk, except for cottage cheese, but we're not talking about that here. So the first series I have here is Cinder by, well, the series isn't Cinder. The series is The Lunar Chronicles, which starts with Cinder by Marissa Meyer. I was recommended this series by a friend, and this is a series I read this year, and I wouldn't say it was awful. It's definitely not spoiled milk, but it wasn't really my cup of tea. I think had I read this back in high school, I would probably like it more. So it's between potato chips and DoorDash. I'm gonna go with potato chips because I'd say truly I could have gone with or without reading it. I mean, it doesn't make or break the books I've read. Like, it's just there in my head. And then the next series I have is The Mortal Instruments, which when I read, I absolutely loved. But when I look back and think about the things I can remember from it, I'm kind of like, eh. So had you asked me in high school, I probably would have been like, it's perfect. I love it. It's the best series ever. But now I'd say it's probably along the same lines as the Lunar Chronicles. Um, yeah, I'll leave it there and then I'll fix things when we come back at the end. The next series is The Last Hours, which starts with Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. Um, this series isn't finished yet. The next book is probably going to come out next year, and that would be Chain of Thorns, and that will be the last book. I just finished Chain of Iron, so I'm kind of on a high after reading it. So I really like this. I'd say it's perfection. I'm pretty attached to everyone in it. Um, I think the only problem I had with it is that I couldn't recommend it really to other people without recommending the Mortal Instruments and all those subsequent books so you could understand it fully. But other than that, I really loved it and I'm really excited for the last book to come out for that. The next book series is Divergent by Veronica Roth. This is another one of those where at the time I'd be like, yes, it's perfect. I love it. And now that I look back, I'm like, It wasn't the best, especially Allegiant. That was. Mm. I think I'll probably put this one in potato chips as well. I think it's just there in my head, rent free. I don't think about it often, and I really don't know why I would think about it often. The next series, well, I guess this is a duology, but it's The Girl with All the Gifts by Mr Carey. I read this year as well, and I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't say it's like the best series I've ever read, but it was a step outside of YA for me, and I really did enjoy that experience. So I'd say it's probably Chef's Kiss. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I'd say it's up there. Next, we have The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Um, I read this a long, long time ago. This was like one of the series that got me into reading, and I probably should reread it. I know, like Mortal Instruments, like that's definitely something that I plan on rereading maybe next year. I'm shooting for. But The Hunger Games, I think it's probably Chef's Kiss. Because, like I've been saying about the Mortal Instruments and Divergent, I look back and I'm like, oh, they weren't really as good as I thought they were. Like, remember them? And I didn't really enjoy them as much as I did. I just wanted to be nice and be all like, yeah, they're great. I love them because all my friends like them. Um, but the Hunger Games, I look back on that and I'm all like, yeah, those were some good books. I very much liked them, and I still would to this day. Then we have Legend by Mary Lou. I've only read the first book of this, and then I kind of DNF'd it. And it's not necessarily because it was bad, it was just because I didn't want to seek out the other books. This is another book I read this year that's just, I had owned it for a while, and so I was like, you know what, I'll just read it. And then the ending, I was like, I don't feel motivated to go find the rest of the books. So I'd put that in mid tier too, with Divergent, the Lunar Chronicles, and the Mortal Instruments. The next series is Matched. I read this a while back. My mom recommended it to me, and honestly, I wasn't a fan of it. It was probably like the first book that well, no, I'll get to that, but it's one of the lowest rated series for me, probably, that I've read. So I wouldn't say it's spoiled milk. There is a series that's spoiled milk, and it is coming up, but it's probably just DoorDash for me. Next series is The Maze Runner. This is one of those that I didn't really fake to love. I started reading it and I was all like, well, since I started reading this series, I kind of just want to finish it because that's just kind of how I am. Once I start something, I like to complete it. But through it, I remember not being too attached to any of the characters and just kind of sitting there for the ride. So I'd say that's probably mid tier as well for me. This next series, Nightshade, I can't remember who it's by. Andrea Cremer, yeah, that's who it's by. This series, I DNF'd on the second book, just because if you're familiar with Wattpad Werewolf, it was essentially written like that, and I was like young when I DNF'd it too, which says something because I read like anything back then. I just couldn't get into it. I was like, nah, I'll pass. So I'm definitely gonna put that in spoiled milk. And then next series is Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. I am reading this series right now, and so far I've been really enjoying it. I'd honestly probably put it in Chef's Kiss, but I will note that I am only on the third book. I haven't started the third book yet. It's one of the books I'm hoping to read next month. But so far, the first two, I really enjoyed them, even though they are tropey and all that, but it's a fun ride. And then the next series is The Dark Artifices by Cassandra Clare. I love, 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 love this series. Honestly, it's like I said, I'm kind of on a high from Chain of Iron. So it's really hard for me to tell right now which one I like more. But up until recently, I always said The Dark Artifices is the best Cassandra Clare series and probably my favorite series to date. And yes, that goes over the Infernal Devices. It just hit me right in the heart. The characters and the story, all of it did. I just, it's one of those books that if you get me to start talking about, I won't shut up about it. And I'm really excited to reread it when I go back through all of Cassandra Clare's works and reread those. The next series is another series by Cassandra Clare, which is another popular one of hers, which is The Infernal Devices. I really like this series. I mean, pretty much everyone who read it did. I'd put it up in perfection, but under The Last Hours, but it's really good. It's one of those where when I'm reading The Last Hours and I read scenes with Tessa and Will, I just cry every time because, like, that is, it just hits me right in the heart, and I just can't handle it. I love it so much. Like I said, I'm still on that Chain of Iron high, so I don't know if it's actually quote unquote worse. Let's be real, if it's in perfection, it's not worse bad by any means, but in terms of lineup, I'm not sure. My vision is clouded by Chain of Iron right now. And the next series is Twilight by Stephanie Meyers. I DNF this too, and to be honest, the first and second book I quote unquote finished, but I skipped around a lot in it because I just got bored. I'm like, I'm done with this. Can I just skip a chapter? Which is awful. But also, I was like 10. So, like, don't come for me. But it's definitely going in spoiled milk. I DNF'd it probably about a third of the way through Eclipse, in case anyone's wondering. The next series is The Uglies by Scott Westerfield. Yeah, Westerfield. This series was, so the first book I remember really liking, being like, wow, this is a really cool concept and all that. But in the second book, the character basically goes through a whole personality change and forgets her whole past, and it's this whole thing, and it's kind of annoying reading it, and you're like, okay, whatever. And then you get to the third book, and they essentially do the same thing again. You're like, okay, this is stupid. I'm over this. So I'd say the first book is really good, but the rest of the series, just having your main character go through a personality change and memory wipe like every book is just not it. It's really annoying. And the last series is the Carve the Mark series by Veronica Roth. I read Carve the Mark when it first came out, so I remember reading it and then hearing about the controversy, which was, the big one was racism, which I've watched videos on it, and I'll link a video about it in case anyone's curious that I watched. I was like, okay, I think I understand more. The racism part seemed to be picking and choosing characters to fit the narrative it wanted to say that the book was quote unquote racist. And then there was some people who had issues with how it dealt with chronic pain. And from my understanding of looking into that, that came down to kind of a matter of how you choose to interpret it. And then the third issue people had with it was self-harm, because it's part of the culture in the book that when you take a life, you carve the mark on your arm, which I definitely see that point and think there should have been more trigger warning in that. But those facts aside, I'm not going to say I really, really enjoyed it. It's definitely not perfection, but I really did like the series overall. And I know I gave the last book like 5 out of 5 because I didn't really see anything with it. And then I think the first book I gave like 4 out of 5. But yeah, I think it's definitely chef's kiss. It's definitely up there, but you do have to keep in mind what people were saying about it being slightly controversial and all that. And then let me go through here and close ranks. So at the top, I have the Dark Artifices, which I'm okay with that. I believe that. I love that series. And then we have The Last Hours, which I'm okay with putting in second right now just because Chain of Iron was so good. It was spectacular. And then I have the Infernal Devices, which, again, I'm okay with that. Then the Chef's Kiss category, I'd put The Girl with All the Gifts at the top of that because, like I said, it was really good. I really enjoyed the experience, the journey it took me on. And then next, I think I'd leave The Hunger Games just because the high nostalgia factor for me. And I read the prequel of Snow Story this year, and I just remind me of how much I love that world and how much it got me into YA and just books in general. And yeah, I think it's definitely up there for me still, just nostalgia alone. And then next, it's hard to say because I haven't finished The Red Queen yet. So I'm going to leave that as is, since, you know what, I'm going to put Carve the Mark above just because I haven't finished Red Queen yet. So I don't know if I'll love the rest of the books as much as I liked the first two, because technically I'm only halfway through because there's 4 books in total. And then Potato Chips, I definitely put City of Bones at the top just because kind of with Hunger Games, it has a lot of nostalgia for me. Even now, when I read Cassandra Clare books, it's always because I started with the Mortal Instruments. So, I mean, you got to give it that at least. Next series I put is probably Divergent, just another thing that has high nostalgia for me, but not as much as the Mortal Instruments does, obviously. Next, I probably put The Maze Runner. It doesn't really have a nostalgia factor attached to it at all, but it's there in my head. That's what mid-tier really is for me. It's just there in my head. I don't know what to do with it. And then I would leave Cinder above Legend because I did end up finishing the Lunar Chronicles, and like I said, I didn't feel like seeking out the Legend books. And then in our fourth category, I would Uglies or Matched? Which one is worse? I think Matched is more bearable than Uglies, because like I said, Uglies, changing your character's personality every book is so annoying, because you think you know the character and you may be slightly attached to them by the end of the book, and it's like, never mind, I'm a different person now. And it's frustrating. And then our last category, spoiled milk. Let me see. Do I want bad Wattpad werewolf at the bottom, or do I want Twilight at the bottom? I think a lot of werewolf and vampire books, a lot of those blew up after Twilight. So I kind of feel like Nightshade may be like have come from the Twilight and the hype around it. So I think that puts it above Twilight because Twilight is the genesis of it. So we will leave Twilight at the very bottom and the Dark Artifices at the very top for my final ranking. Alright, make sure if you enjoyed the video to leave a like and comment what your opinion is below. Do you agree with my ranking? What other series have you read? Like I said, I have a really short list since I took about a 3-year hiatus and then just got back into it. Maybe I'll do another updated video once I've really gotten more into the full swing of things and make a new tier list. That may be interesting. If you'd like to stick around and see what else I have in store, you can go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Other than that, I will leave you for today. Thank you for watching. Bye.